What changes when you lead with one act of vulnerability your team actually needs to see this week? Hi there, I'm Greg Venning. Welcome to the Questing Chiropractic podcast. If bonuses, policy manuals, pep talks, incentives, if they're falling flat, then this conversation shows a better way to be managing your team. We explore how to enroll your team by meeting them where they are at, using the innate model to tailor inspiration, teaching, coaching, and pressure testing. Expect simple actions that you can use this week, like a not me behavior reset or running the innate model quiz with your team and using vulnerability to unlock growth. The outcome is more ease in communication and real ascension for your practice members, team, and associates. This is a powerful episode. As always, if you listen to something that you think a friend or a colleague could do with hearing, please forward this on to them. And please subscribe if you're on YouTube, or give us an up to 5-star rating on whichever audio platform you're on. Listen on. Welcome to the Questing Chiropractic podcast. We help you grow as visionary, vitalistic, and capable chiropractors who are always on. We do things differently as we help to elegantly awaken your innate wisdom within. We help you create robust, predictable, and trustworthy practices that serve oceans of people and yet still have free time for yourselves and your families. We use neuroscience to deliver better business results so that you can get greater, deeper, and more effective impact in more ways. We are Questing Chiropractors, and this is our story.
Hello, Emma. Great to have you here. Great to chat with you.
Hi, Nimrod. Always good to come back and see what unfolds on our chat.
I know, absolutely. It takes us in a certain direction. We've got no planning for this except to lean in and surrender to whatever the universe flow happens.
What a way to live our lives. I love it.
So what's been coming up as a nice, strong theme for you recently that you think would be helpful?
Well, I'm going to run off of your introduction, which is lean in and see what the universe has for us. A big topic, really, to lean in and just trust the process. And I really feel like that's a beautiful way to live our lives. And what gets in the way of that and what stops us from just continuing to accept what comes right in front of our face and breathe in and out and move past it. And in my own experience, it's me. I get in the way of it. And if I look at practice members and conversations that I have with the team and the flow, it's us as individuals that block our own potential. And that in itself is a bit of a smack in the face. And it's like, oh, actually, I'm the only one that has the potential and the power and the emotional intelligence to point the finger back at myself and things like my way.
Yeah. It's kind of it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because, you know, if we look at the story of our lives, we've always been the central character of all of it, right? There's no one else who takes center stage in our stories except from ourselves. Even if we're talking about someone else, it's how it relates to us. And so, you know, we naturally put on some certain filters that color that story. And you just brought up a really important part of that, which is our ability to understand our emotional component in there, that emotional intelligence. So what does it mean for you?
Yeah, I think that's huge, our ability to realize that our emotions play a big part in how we experience our life, but also to realize that they are not the full picture. And you use somebody else as an analogy there. It's like if there is something that's happening and somebody else caused me to feel this, and because they did that and I didn't have the insight or capacity to respond in that moment, now I'm cranky and my day is ruined. And really, if we zoom out and have a look from that non-dualistic perspective of there's no right or wrong and there's no good or bad, and we are the main character in our movie that we call life, and actually the person in front of us is maybe I'm jumping ahead 5 steps here, but is a gift to us to be able to show or mirror back or allow us to see a perspective or feel an emotion, because often if we're stimulated to feel an emotion, it's not the person that's causing us to feel that. Nobody can make you feel an emotion. It is often a reaction to something that's happened in the past, and we are firing through our subconscious mind a response that is not necessarily warranted for what's in front of us, i.e. you're driving to practice and somebody cuts you off and all this fire comes out. It's like, did that person really cause that fire, or was there something underneath that has caused that explosion? And what my perspective of emotional intelligence is to realize that there's nobody else other than yourself in this game, and they're all allowing to experience different parts of yourself, and for me to experience different parts of myself. And if we're pointing the finger, that person made me feel mad, that person made me feel sad, that person made me feel happy. And at what point are we taking ownership of our own stuff?
Yeah, for me, it brings up a couple of things. First of all, to speak to that last part, it's a pretty clear indicator when we play the victim and we outsource responsibility in any part of our life, whether it's for the emotions that arise with me, or, you know, my level of success or not, or how my day goes, or my level of energy, you know, or how I wake up in the morning, whatever it is, we can play the victim and outsource responsibility on any of that, including, as you said, my emotional state. And I think that emotional intelligence also, when I think about these kind of different parts of our intelligences, I think about how a child grows and develops. All levels of emotional sensation and expression are perfect. The question is, are they useful, and do they serve you well, and are they perfect for where you are at the moment and where you would love to go in life? So that response in traffic of, you know, fuck you, what you do, cutting me off, you know, is often not useful, and sometimes can be useful, right? So it's really contextual there.
Yeah, huge. I love that you brought in children, because I mean, children are blank slates. We were a blank slate at one point, and our learned response to different scenarios will grow and lead us to where we are. And I think a lovely example of that is if there's a child, and let's take 2 children with 2 different family backgrounds. One child sees a snake, and the mother sees that the child saw the snake, and the child is walking towards it. The mother has a fear of snakes. She goes, screams, runs over, grabs the child, pulls it away. It shocks the child. Mum's stressed. Baby feels stressed, or child feels stressed. And then there's the conversation, you need to be careful, they're dangerous, they're blah, 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 blah. And there's another child who sees a snake, does the exact same action, walks towards it, runs towards it, and this mother is a wildlife extraordinaire and deals with snakes, and she walks beside the child and shows the child how to interact with a snake, maybe even picks it up, and that child's experience of that particular scenario is going to be super different to the first child. Now, there's no right or wrong or good or bad. However, what that does is then builds our belief system. And, you know, if we start to link this into chiropractic as the chiropractor or amongst our teams, if we look at a problem that occurs and our reaction to that problem, often if you had the experience of the mother who had a fear of the snake, our reaction may come from that space, and it's not necessarily regulated, and we might blame someone because the system isn't working. But if we zoom out and we look at the big picture of how did we get here, why did we have that reaction, and then all of a sudden we quote unquote have the emotional intelligence and the experience to be able to navigate the scenario in a really different way than to come with our initial overwhelmed reaction.
Yeah. So let's maybe run this through the quadrant model, the innate model. So at a conceptual philosophical principles basis, how do you see emotions and emotional intelligence conceptually?
Yeah, I mean it's very much a part of who we are as humans, our emotional reaction. As we have come to understand who we are and how we do things, emotions are very much a part of the big picture. Just like our thinking mind is, just like our gut intuition is, just like our ability to do an adjustment and intuit an adjustment or think through an adjustment. Then our ability to have intelligence around our emotion is a grander idea, but it requires some level of connection to what you're feeling. It requires a level of understanding that we are our reactions. But from a concept level, it's part of the whole.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just brought up so much that made my mind race in 10 different ways. A part of it is, first of all, to recognize from a chiropractic perspective, from a quest perspective, conceptually, that emotions are a normal, natural, perfect part of being human, right? Like there's some people, and I was just thinking to a mum this week who was really trying to be vigilant with her 3.5-year-old, controlling his behavior. And when he responded strongly, showed an emotion, she tried to control that as well. And so it's almost this, there's some people that may take the stance of emotions are there to be controlled and regulated at all costs, and that there's a certain facade we need to put on. So it's almost, as you said before, judging, that we should be a certain way. So I think conceptually, we would say that being a natural part of being human means that it is natural and it's perfect and it's acceptable. And then the question is, if we maybe have a look at that, the emotion comes, as you said, from that snake example. There was a trigger, a stimulus, a moment, millisecond for my being to comprehend it and decide how to respond. And then there was a response, and that may be physiological, it may be mental, it may be the soul as well, right? It could come body, mind, soul, all the way up, the response that we get to that. And part of that is that combination of all of that becomes the emotional response. So I then sense my response to the stimulus, and then I run a certain computation on the emotion as well, right? So it's not just the snake; it's also I swore and I shouted and I did all these physiological things. And what do I think about that as well, right? So there's a whole lot of steps of analysis and response in there. Is that how you're seeing it as well?
100%. I really like that you've brought that up, especially, our reaction is never wrong. It's how quickly we can come back to that sense of peace and calm. And I talk to mothers about this a lot within practice. The ability for your child to express themselves is vital. That's a part of, and as adults too.
Yeah.
The teaching from that is that sadness is not wrong, happiness is not wrong, anger and frustration is not wrong. It's so important that that's expressed. The teaching comes from feel it, express it. Focus on where you angle that expression. You can be angry, you can go and slam a door, but you don't hit mummy. So use it, get it out, teach your children, teach yourself, teach your practice members that if we store these emotions in us, now we're really good at not storing happiness, not storing joy, because it's socially acceptable to feel these things on the street. It's not socially acceptable to be walking down the street with tears running down your cheeks and needing to sit down and having a big cry. So what we tend to do is to push these down. It's really vital for us to experience these emotions, because what we know from a chiropractic perspective is that if we're full of these emotions, we vibrate differently, we become subluxated. And so how can we learn to express these emotions in a safe way, in a safe place, without blaming your husband or your wife for your anger? Or it's like, yeah, I'm feeling that, I'm taking responsibility for it, I'm not gonna throw it at you. I'm going to go through my own process, and I might need you in that, or I might, if you have the capacity, I might use you to be part of my safety in expressing that. But it's not necessarily that you were the cause of that,
Right.
because I have learned, because my mum taught me, if you know, we're talking about mothers who are growing children, my mum taught me that I'm allowed to be angry, I'm just not allowed to punch mummy.
Yep. Or I'm not allowed to be angry, and I'm not allowed to express it because that's not socially acceptable either. So before we jump into two examples I've got in my head, I just want to kind of go through that quadrant 2-3 bit of this, the understanding, the knowledge, analysis, and then onto the application and mastery bit. So it sounds like emotional intelligence means there's a spectrum of emotions, and we may have different capacity to access them, to understand them, to include them, to invite them, to be really present with them and expressing them, and to also interact in different ways of emotions with those around us, whether that's in practice, with our family, socially, or with our close ones. And intelligence always brings up for me the ability to see a range of things and to pick what is most suitable for our best move forwards. So you may look at it as survival or evolution or development, but it's basically, you know, what is best for me in this moment out of all of these different things, and then how can I really lean into that, as we said before. And so, you know, when I think about, it's interesting, you know, you brought up the kids and babies, because a baby certainly can't name an emotion. They'll cry, they'll laugh, they'll giggle, but they have no idea what it is. If they were to remove themselves and look, or if they look at another baby, they can respond, but they can't name it. They can't say, oh, that baby is expressing sadness or is expressing glee or ecstasy or whatever, right? So at a low level, we express, but we can't name it. We observe, but we can't really know what's going on. And those emotions really rule a lot of our physiology at that early stage, right? The baby is crying and feeling sadness, and that continues until they're consoled and feel secure and safe and seen by usually the mother or the father or someone else. And so it really overtakes them at those low levels. And I guess as adults, we can feel really overrun, overwrought by them if we're still at that kind of level of expressing emotions and emotional intelligence. And then maybe above that, you know, you think about a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, they start to name what they're feeling and what they're observing and these things that are arising. And then they learn a certain amount of observation, perception, analysis, and I don't want to say control, but maybe decision, maybe some of that intelligence comes up there. And they learn, you know, within a social group as well, when to express or emote certain emotions or not. And then maybe it's, you know, if we do keep developing, then we'll say that we not only observe what's going on and choose how we go, but we can actually readily describe emotions deeply, what they feel like, with beauty and passion and grit, and also understand where they came from, what triggered them, why am I feeling like this? But then also there's that depth of being able to sit with it and be with it and really, you know, simply allow it, but not allow it to go on unnecessarily, you know, more appropriately. So that's that intelligence. Would you agree that that's kind of how, you know, it's how I see kids developing maybe through beyond teenage years? And some of those are available to us as adults, and maybe we got a little bit, you know, stuck at some levels for some of us emotionally. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I love that. I think you've really gone from the primitive response, simply just to be in full expression, and then it doesn't matter how you are affecting other people around you. You were just like, this is me and this is what I'm doing. And then we've gone all the way up to being able to feel it. And then maybe one more step in that is to transformation from that emotional experience. So we've gone through the spectrum, and then from that, how can we use our emotional experience to pop to that new level, to transform? How can we use that challenge that created that response, which should be expressed without having yelled at our CA or got frustrated and internalized that feeling? How can we use that experience to see something from a different perspective? And that's where the intelligence side of things comes into it, because you have evolved to a point where there is 10 different views of this one or 100 different views of this one particular experience that you've had. So I really like that evolution that you've used. And I also want to second you in saying that sometimes we experience humans who are stuck in this initial childhood phase. And sometimes I'm sure I have been in particular scenarios where I'm doing that. And, you know, if we can look at that and learn from it, these are all okay. If we ignore that we don't have a role in our emotions, then we are still stuck down in that first
maybe
phase.
to give a really quick example on that, at the end of last week, not the one we're in now, I've been having a few quite full-on weeks in practice, and I had just finished the shift at the very end of the week, and I was done. And I came to my CA, and my CA, I have a team of CAs, but this one who's in charge of booking in first visits, she's like, "Oh, this is amazing. I've booked in another first visit for you next week." And in my exhaustion, I was like, I don't want any more fucking first visits. I am so done. My book is full. I get rid of the first visits. I don't want you to book in anymore. And she's like, "But look," and you know, she was quite taken aback, and she was so happy with herself. And she showed me, and I had like 6 first visits for this week I'm currently in now. And I'm like, I don't want them. Get rid of them. Put them to the associates. I don't need them. My book, you know. And I was really like livid, clearly expressing emotion without intelligently digesting it and thinking, is this the best response? And, you know, I recovered the relationship later that night and the next day. And by some miracle, I turned up on Monday morning and I had no first visits this week. But, so in a way it's useful, right? But obviously that's not useful. And that's because I was exhausted. And so when we're exhausted, we devolve. And when we're under stress, we devolve. And when we're overwhelmed, we devolve, right? So even all of us as humans, not to say I have such emotional intelligence, but all of us do get access to these lower levels of intelligence of our emotions as well. And they will come out. And the curious, interesting thing is to go, oh, that was kind of curious, wasn't it? What does that mean for me?
Yeah, I love that. And I use the expression often as we can't know where we're going until we know where we came from. And what I hear you say is that as soon as you had the capacity to take a breath after your huge full-on weeks, you looked in your revision mirror and you went, that's where I came from. And then from that space, you could go, well, from that, I know where I'm going. I'm going to have a conversation with my CA, and that's emotional intelligence. It's not necessarily in the moment.
Right.
I mean, if you have the capacity to come online and go, wow, I'm doing this. I mean, that's 10 steps ahead. But the idea here is that it's not necessarily about not responding. We're always going to respond. And if we have a full tank, we've exercised, we've had a great breakfast, we've breathed the fresh air, we've had the sun, we had a great night's sleep, our response is going to be different to
absolutely.
Friday afternoon and where we've had 100 million things on our plate. And that's okay because we are having this human experience. It's how quickly can we go, oh, we've been pushed 90 degrees, how can we come back up to standing? And that's the capacity, that's the journey of our lives.
Yeah, it's kind of, to use a bit of a quest metaphor, it's like being in a sailing boat out at sea and the wind suddenly hits you one direction and you go there a little bit and then you go, oh, course correct, so how far are you going to go in that direction before you realize and you decide to course correct, right? I want to bring up an example, and I'd love your thoughts on this, that is very appropriate for a lot of the people that listen to this podcast. So imagine you have an associate, relatively new out of college. They're building their emotional resilience and adaptability. They have someone who they've poured their heart and soul into the first visit and second visit, and that person rejects the idea of care. And so the associate, emotionally collapses in that moment. Right? They're like, oh, but I did all of this, and why did they not choose me? And what did I do wrong? And what, all of that sort of stuff. And how can, and then they go from that, questioning themselves, doubting themselves, to anger at the person and maybe the rest of the team and what they did or didn't do, then to brooding as well, And that's this quite a bit with new grads. So how do you read that in terms of emotional intelligence?
Yeah, it's the growth phase. And when we're put into new scenarios, we get a new opportunity to grow. And sometimes we do go back to the beginning. And so if you've, as a new grad, you've just spent 5-6 years of intense study and you got really good at that. Your emotional capacity to be able to deal with exams and do this and do that, you likely have had 5 or 6 years to build that. Then all of a sudden, I mean, you probably off the top of your head can name the 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 different things that a new grad is going through. It's like, hey, now I have to pay my own bills. Now I'm doing this. Now I have to prove myself as a professional. And look at all of the other associates that I have to compare myself with, and da 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 da. And then they have their visit, and then it pushes them back to that first response of the first primitive experience of emotions. I think you put it so eloquently. It's the art of building adaptability and the art of building resilience in a new scenario. We go slowly, we go surely. We have to have the experience, because you can tell a new grad until you're blue in the face, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, that is going to happen. But, and I think this is true with all of us, this is a really good point here, until we experience something, until we have that embodied feeling of being in a situation which stimulates the emotion, as opposed to it simply being an intellectual concept of sometimes people drop out of care, even if we love them dearly. But to have that experience of it, then they get to feel it. And then we get to feel it in whatever aspect in practice and whatever comes up. And from that space, that's where we have the opportunity to step up.
Yeah, and that's, such an interesting point, isn't it? That we try and cerebralize all of these things, but emotions are in the body, right? They have a strong root there anyway. So is that associate wrong to feel broody, rejected, angry?
Of course not. It's like telling you when you had the response to the traffic that you were wrong, or that, when your partner asked you to pick up something and happened. It is what it is. There's no right or wrong in this. As long as we're learning from the process. And often what we as principals like to run in and do is that we want to fix the problem. We want to make them feel better. And how we do that, and perhaps not the most emotionally intelligent way to do that, is be like, don't worry, this is how I do it. And we give them the tools and we give them the techniques. And it's not that that's wrong, but we're missing a step. And as humans, all we ever want is to be heard, to be understood, to be loved. And so meeting people where they're at, and you do this every day with your practice members, meeting them where they're at and then giving them an arm up to that next level, holding the space. I don't like to use this term, but holding the space a bit wider than perhaps what they know is possible. And we do this with our associates. It's like, meeting you where you're at, that must feel really crap. That really sucks. I've felt that before. And going back to your experience might be helpful. I've felt that before. And we just have to ride it out. And I hear you. And finding a bit of compassion and connecting to their emotional space doesn't mean you go into it and you talk about, well, they shouldn't have done it. You don't need to go into that, but just accepting that where they are in that moment. And sometimes as soon as people feel like there is that level of validation, then they can step up. And if they're not at the point where the validation allows them to step up, that's where you create a wider vision or a wider view of that particular scenario.
Yeah, again, I go back so much to the lessons of neurodevelopment or human development in babies and children. And as you said, really what we want when we're feeling hurt is to be seen and heard and felt and secure and safe, and allow that to express itself. It'd be kind of like a kid tripping over and hurting themselves, not in a bad pathological way, and trying to just get rid of their experience of the pain. But that's a lesson that's important, right? It means that they're going to learn better coordination and understand what a sharp table looks like. And, you can't take away that experience. That's not necessarily useful. But it also takes a level of emotional intelligence of the parent or of the principal. So there's layers here that the principal, it's useful for them to have that developed level of emotional intelligence here as well.
Something I want to add to that too is Greg, one of the pilots at Quest, often speaks to is that when it comes to decision making in practice and when it comes to creating a forward moving direction in our vision, it's really important that we are doing it when we have a calm emotional state, when we are doing emotional intelligence. And so we're making decisions where our parasympathetic state is online as opposed to being in complete sympathetic overwhelm and perhaps in a really big emotional experience. Making decisions from that place is really not useful. And sometimes, if I can be really honest, when I'm really emotional because I'm pointing the finger at my husband, I'm thinking to myself, why did I even get married? And then 5 minutes later, when I look at him and I've calmed myself down, I've taken some responsibility and I've looked at it, it's like, of course I'm in this marriage. But in the moment, and if I was to make a decision from that, see you later, it's not useful because that's not our intelligent mind running the show. It's that emotion that peaks for 5 seconds, 5 minutes, and our ability to come back to neutral is super important. But ensuring that big decisions are not made from that heat and that overwhelm or the sadness or whatever we journey through, because again, there's no wrong in experiencing the emotion. Experience it, feel it, move through it. Don't make decisions from those spaces. Don't make decisions to fire somebody because they did something wrong in the moment and you know what, you out. No, this is not
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's not our most resourceful space when we're there. So maybe in another podcast we talk about how emotions could lead us in decisions, because sometimes we hear or feel ourselves that my gut instinct, my emotion is going to tell me, and steer me right or wrong. But maybe we can leave that for another podcast. So Emma, just to finish off, what sort of resources could people find through Quest to help them develop some of this and reflect on it and to steer them better in their practice towards more success, whatever that may mean for them?
Yeah, I love this question. And within Quest, there's an overwhelming there's so many different resources that are on offer. And I say overwhelming on purpose because in terms of specifics on how we can support you, there's what we notice a lot of the coaches do and what we intentionally focus on is how your position is affecting your life, is affecting your practice. And so breaking this down is looking at simple things, as looking at beliefs, looking at values. And, I say simple things, and I think in this day and age, there's like, I know my beliefs, I know my values, but these are so useful because they're a big direction and a big rock, perhaps, or an iceberg under the sea, because from this space we can really see what are our drivers and what are perhaps the voids within our life. Those are two off the top of my head.
And I think part of the muscle that we were talking about is allowing our emotions to move from being reactive to being resourceful, and part of that is feeling it, sensing it, stopping, using the breath, calming, recentering, choosing, and then responding in a resourceful way, in the most resourceful way. And to do that, it's very useful to know where you're at, where you come from, and where you're going. And that's a lot of those resources that you were talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so easy to say that. And we all know that we have to breathe and take a second before we respond. Intellectually, I know that everybody listening knows it. But how often do you actually use it? How often do you breathe deeply and allow yourself, your intellectual mind to come on before you create that response?
Yep.
That is the intelligence.
Yep.
That is your ability to come back online and center. So Very good.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Emma. I'm sure this will be extremely useful as we test our own emotional intelligence through our own growth and development, and more of that to come, I'm sure, for the rest of our lives.
Love it. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
the chat,
Emma.
Nimrod. It was
You
amazing.
too.